The auction hall stretched across 3 city blocks on Zephyria Prime, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent advertisements in 17 different alien languages. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered for the monthly Imperial slave auction, where the spoils of conquest were sold to the highest bidder. The air hummed with the excited chatter of buyers examining their potential purchases. Commander Vextar of the Galactic Empire's Third Fleet adjusted his ceremonial armor as he surveyed the crowd from his elevated platform. As the ranking Imperial officer overseeing today's proceedings, he took personal pride in the quality of merchandise displayed. Row upon row of caged beings from dozens of conquered worlds stood in silent submission, their spirits broken by months of Imperial conditioning. But today's centerpiece was special. In the center of the hall, a single reinforced cage held what appeared to be a primitive biped from a recently subjugated world called Earth. The creature stood upright despite obvious injuries, its strange pale skin marked with purple bruises and dried blood. Unlike the other slaves who cowered or wept, this one stared directly ahead with an intensity that made even seasoned buyers uncomfortable. "Lot number 847, announced the auctioneer, a three-eyed Plutonian whose voice boomed through translation devices. "A prime specimen from the Sol system, species designation human, male, approximately 30 rotations old by their planetary cycle. Captured during the pacification of Earth's military installations." The human wore the tattered remains of what appeared to be some kind of uniform. Across his chest, barely legible symbols spelled out a name: Sergeant James Mitchell. His dark eyes swept the crowd with calculating precision, as if memorizing every face in the audience. Vextar leaned forward with interest. Earth had been a routine conquest, barely worth the ammunition expended. The planet's inhabitants fought with primitive kinetic weapons and chemical explosives, laughably obsolete against Imperial plasma technology. The entire campaign had taken less than a week, with most major population centers surrendering after witnessing orbital bombardments. "The bidding will start at 50,000 credits, the auctioneer continued. "This specimen shows exceptional physical conditioning and combat training. Note the muscular development and tactical awareness. Would make an excellent gladiator or personal guard for discerning buyers." A wealthy Christian merchant raised a jeweled appendage. 60,000. 75,000, countered a Vorthon crime lord, his cybernetic implants glowing with excitement. The human, Mitchell, remained perfectly still during the bidding war. His breathing was controlled, measured. Vextar had overseen thousands of slave auctions, and he recognized the signs of someone biding their time. Most captured soldiers either broke under torture or died from their wounds. This one had done neither. As the bidding climbed past 200,000 credits, Vextar noticed something that made his mandibles click with amusement. The human was testing his restraints, not obviously, but with tiny, almost imperceptible movements that probed for weaknesses in the energy bonds holding him. Clever creature. 500,000 credits, boomed a voice from the back of the hall. The crowd turned to see Ambassador Quendar, representative of the hegemony worlds. The diplomatic immunity badge on his chest glowed with authority. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 500,000 was more than most sentient beings were worth. "Going once to Ambassador Quendar." That's when Vextar decided to have some fun. Rising from his seat, he gestured dismissively at the human. "Hold the auction," he commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of imperial rank. "I want to examine this merchandise more closely." The hall fell silent. When an imperial commander spoke, even ambassadors listened. Vextar descended from his platform, his heavy boots clicking against the polished floor. Behind him followed a squad of imperial guards, their plasma rifles charged and ready. He stopped directly in front of Mitchell's cage, studying the human like a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. Up close, he could see the intelligence burning behind those dark eyes. This wasn't the broken stare of a defeated enemy. This was the cold calculation of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Remarkable, Vextar mused, switching to galactic standards so everyone could understand. Earth's military records indicated their soldiers were poorly trained and equipped. Yet this one survived our interrogation protocols. Most species break within hours. Mitchell's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained silent. I'm told humans have an unusual capacity for violence, Vextar continued, circling the cage slowly. Is this true, creature? Are your people as savage as the reports suggest? For the first time since his capture, Mitchell spoke. His voice was hoarse but steady. Why don't you find out? The crowd gasped at the audacity. A slave had just challenged an Imperial commander. Vextar's guards immediately raised their weapons, but he waved them back with an amused laugh. Spirit! I like that. He leaned closer to the cage, his reptilian features twisting into what passed for a smile among his species. Tell me, human, what military unit did you serve with before your capture? 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, Mitchell replied without hesitation. United States Army. Rangers, Vextar repeated, tasting the foreign word. Elite troops according to our intelligence. You must have killed many of my soldiers before your capture. Mitchell's expression didn't change. Not nearly enough. The crowd murmured in shocked excitement. This was better entertainment than they'd expected. Vexatar felt his own excitement building. Most conquered species begged for mercy or cursed their captors in dead languages. This human was different. He showed no fear, no submission, only a cold, patient hatred that reminded Vextar of his own species' warrior traditions. I think, Vextar announced loudly, this specimen requires a more thorough evaluation. He gestured to his guards. Disable the restraint field. I want to see what this ranger is capable of. His second-in-command, Colonel Thane, stepped forward uncertainly. Commander, regulations require— I know what regulations require, Vexatar snapped. This is a personal inspection. Stand down. The energy field flickered and died. Mitchell remained motionless for a heartbeat, then slowly rolled his shoulders, working out kinks from hours of forced immobility. The crowd pressed closer, sensing violence in the air. Vextar drew his ceremonial blade, a monomolecular edge that could cut through most known materials. Show me this famous human fighting spirit creature. Attack me. Mitchell looked at the weapon, then at the dozens of armed guards surrounding them. His tactical assessment took perhaps 3 seconds. Then he smiled for the first time since his capture, and Vextar felt a chill of genuine unease. You sure about that? Mitchell asked quietly. Quite sure. Vextar gestured grandly for the crowd's benefit. Give me your best effort, human. Entertainment before the sale. Mitchell nodded once, as if accepting an inevitable duty. Okay then. What happened next lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, according to the security recordings that would be analyzed later. Mitchell moved with a speed that caught even enhanced alien reflexes off guard. He ducked under Vextar's initial thrust, grabbed the commander's weapon arm, and used the alien's own momentum to drive the monomolecular blade deep into Vextar's throat. The Imperial commander's eyes widened in shock as arterial blood sprayed across the auction floor. He tried to speak, to call for help, but only managed a wet, gurgling sound. Mitchell held him close, almost intimately, as the life drained from his body. That was for Earth, Mitchell whispered in his ear. Vextar collapsed, his ceremonial armor clattering against the floor. The auction hall erupted in chaos as guards opened fire and civilians screamed in terror. Plasma bolts lit up the air, but Mitchell had already moved, using Vexatar's corpse as cover while he assessed his next targets. The revolution that would topple the Galactic Empire had begun with a single act of defiance. and Sergeant James Mitchell, last survivor of Earth's Rangers, was just getting started. The plasma fire lit up the auction hall like a deadly light show, but Mitchell moved through it with the fluid grace of someone who had survived countless firefights. He rolled behind an overturned hover platform as energy bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. The other slaves scattered or cowered in their cages, but many of them watched the lone human with something approaching hope. Colonel Thane barked orders at his troops while simultaneously calling for reinforcements. "Contain the human! Level 2 lockdown protocol! No one leaves this facility!" Mitchell counted muzzle flashes and estimated positions. 12 guards in the immediate area, more pouring in from the entrance corridors. He needed weapons, armor, and most importantly, he needed information. The Empire had databases here, communication arrays, ship manifests. If he could access them... A Christian merchant cowered nearby, his ornate robes singed by weapons fire. Mitchell grabbed him by the collar and hauled him close. "The control room for this facility, where is it?" The merchant's diamond-like eyes reflected pure terror. "Upper level, central spire, please don't kill me." "Stay down and you'll live." Mitchell released him and sprinted for the nearest stairwell. Behind him, Imperial guards gave chase, their heavy armor clanking against the polished floors. The stairwell was narrow, designed for the Empire's typically smaller species. Mitchell took the steps 3 at a time, his longer human legs giving him an advantage. Plasma bolts scorched the walls around him, filling the air with the smell of ionized metal and burning electronics. He reached the upper level as the first guard rounded the corner below. Mitchell grabbed a decorative sculpture from an alcove and hurled it down the stairwell. The guard's shout of surprise was cut short as 50 pounds of crystalline artwork connected with his helmet. The control room was exactly where the merchant had indicated. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Mitchell could see dozens of workstations monitoring everything from atmospheric controls to slave inventories. More importantly, he could see the communication array that connected this facility to the Imperial fleet in orbit. 2 technicians looked up in shock as Mitchell burst through the doors. One reached for an alarm, but Mitchell covered the distance in 2 strides and slammed the alien's head into his console. Sparks flew as delicate instruments shattered under the impact. The second technician, a spindly Vorthon with cybernetic implants, raised his hands in surrender. "Don't hurt me. I'm just a data analyst." "Good." Mitchell grabbed him by the throat and dragged him to the main communications console. "Then you know how to work this. Send a message to the Imperial Fleet Command." The technician's implants flickered with panic. I can't do that. It's treason." "Look around." Mitchell gestured to the chaos visible through the windows below. "I just killed a commander in front of 1,000 witnesses. You think they're going to care about one more charge when they execute you?" The technician's resolve crumbled. What do you want me to send?" Mitchell considered for a moment. He needed to buy time, create confusion in the Imperial ranks. More importantly, he needed to learn about the Empire's military structure, their weaknesses, their current deployments. Information was the most powerful weapon in any war. "Send this exactly." Mitchell spoke slowly and clearly. "Priority Alpha message from Commander Vextar to Fleet Admiral Korath. Human resistance on Zephyria Prime has been severely underestimated. Request immediate tactical assessment of all conquered human colonies. Some appear to be coordinating insurgent activities." The technician typed with trembling fingers. "But Commander Vextar is dead. You killed him." "They don't know that yet." Mitchell watched the message transmit. "And by the time they figure it out, they'll be chasing ghosts across half the galaxy." Footsteps thundered in the corridor outside. Mitchell grabbed the technician's sidearm, a compact plasma pistol, and checked its charge. Nearly full. He'd used similar weapons during Earth's brief resistance, reverse-engineered from captured Imperial equipment. "Is there another way out of here?" he demanded. The technician pointed to a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. "Service tunnels. They connect to the entire facility." Good. Now access the slave database. I want complete records on every human captured during the conquest of Earth. While the technician worked, Mitchell's mind raced through possibilities. Earth was gone, its cities in ruins, its population scattered across the galaxy as slave labor. But humans were still out there, still alive, still capable of fighting. He'd seen it in the eyes of the other prisoners below. The spark wasn't dead yet. Here, the technician displayed a holographic interface, captured human personnel, military and civilian categories. Mitchell studied the data, memorizing names, locations, assignments. Hundreds of his fellow soldiers were scattered across Imperial space, working in mines, factories, gladiator pits. But more importantly, he saw patterns in the distributions. The Empire was using human military personnel as forced labor in strategic installations. They were unknowingly placing trained soldiers in positions where they could do maximum damage. "Download everything to a portable storage unit," he ordered. "And I want current Imperial fleet positions, supply routes, communication protocols." "That's classified beyond my clearance level." Mitchell pressed the plasma pistol against the alien's temple. "Find a way." Outside, the sounds of battle had intensified. Mitchell could hear heavier weapons being brought to bear, probably military-grade equipment from the Imperial garrison. He didn't have much time before they either stormed the control room or simply destroyed it from outside. The technician's implants interfaced directly with the computer systems, bypassing normal security protocols. Data flowed across multiple screens as classified files were accessed and copied. "I'm committing treason against the Empire," he whispered. "They'll execute my entire family for this." "The Empire executed my entire species," Mitchell replied coldly. "At least your family is still alive." A new alarm began blaring, different from the general alert. The technician's face went pale. "Orbital bombardment warning. They're going to glass this entire section rather than risk you escaping." Mitchell grabbed the completed data storage unit and headed for the maintenance hatch. "How long?" 60 seconds for targeting computers to lock on. Maybe 90 if we're lucky." The hatch led to a cramped service tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridors. Mitchell could hear Imperial troops moving through the facility below, their communications chatter indicating growing desperation. They'd lost control of the situation and were falling back on their standard solution: overwhelming firepower. The tunnel system was more extensive than he'd hoped, connecting not just to the auction facility, but to the entire commercial district. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow as automated systems prepared for orbital strike. In 90 seconds, several city blocks would be reduced to molten slag. But 90 seconds was enough. Mitchell reached an access point 3 blocks away and dropped into an abandoned warehouse. Through the skylights, he could see the Imperial dreadnought in low orbit, its massive weapons arrays charging with ominous energy. The ship was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize entire continents. The first bombardment beam lanced down from orbit, striking the auction facility with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The building simply ceased to exist, replaced by a crater of superheated glass and twisted metal. The shock wave shattered windows for miles in every direction. Mitchell felt the ground tremble beneath his feet as secondary explosions rippled through the commercial district. Thousands of civilians were dying in the Imperial response to a single escaped prisoner. It was exactly the kind of disproportionate brutality that had characterized the conquest of Earth. But now he had something the Empire feared more than any weapon: information. The data storage unit contained the locations of every human prisoner, every Imperial installation, every supply route and communication protocol. More importantly, it contained proof that humans were still fighting, still resisting, still dangerous enough to warrant orbital bombardment. Mitchell studied the holographic display from the storage unit, plotting his next moves. There was a detention facility on Kepler 442b holding 200 captured Marines, a mining operation on Proxima Centauri using former Navy personnel as slave labor, a gladiator arena on Titan where Army Rangers were forced to fight for alien entertainment. Each location represented an opportunity. Each imprisoned human was a potential ally in the war that was about to begin. The Empire had made a critical error in keeping human prisoners alive. They saw them as valuable assets, sources of labor and entertainment. They hadn't considered that humans had something most conquered species lacked: an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Mitchell activated the portable communicator he'd taken from the technician, broadcasting on frequencies he hoped other human prisoners might be monitoring. The message was simple: broadcast in English using military codes that any former Earth soldier would recognize. "This is Sergeant James Mitchell, 1st Battalion, 75th Rangers. Earth's children are still alive. The war continues. Rally to these coordinates when you can. The Empire is about to learn what happens when you cage a predator species." Above him, the Imperial dreadnought began moving to a higher orbit. Its mission complete. The crew probably thought they'd solved their human problem with a single bombardment. They had no idea they'd just started a revolution that would consume their entire civilization. Mitchell shouldered his equipment and headed for the spaceport. It was time to begin the real war. 6 months later, the Imperial High Command gathered in emergency session aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. Admiral Korath, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet, studied holographic displays showing rebellion spreading across 17 star systems. Red indicators marked attacks on Imperial installations, supply convoys destroyed, entire garrisons wiped out by coordinated strikes. "Explain to me!" Korath's voice carried the barely controlled fury of someone watching an empire crumble. "How a single escaped slave has become a galactic threat." Intelligence Director Vexnall activated a tactical display. "The human Mitchell has somehow coordinated a network of insurgent cells across Imperial space. Our analysts estimate he's freed over 12,000 human prisoners and recruited an unknown number of alien sympathizers." The numbers were staggering. What had begun as a simple prison break had evolved into something the Empire had never encountered: a species-wide rebellion that refused to follow conventional military doctrine. Human forces struck without warning, melted away before Imperial responses, and showed a complete disregard for their own casualties that bordered on fanatical. "How are they moving undetected?" demanded Fleet Admiral Thaxon. "Our sensor networks should be tracking every ship larger than a shuttle. They're not using conventional spacecraft," Vexnall explained. "The humans have somehow modified mining vessels, cargo haulers, even escape pods into functional warships. They're also using Imperial vessels captured during raids. Yesterday's attack on the Proxima station was carried out using our own destroyer, complete with valid authorization codes." The holographic display shifted to show the aftermath of that particular attack. The Proxima mining station, a facility that had processed rare minerals for over 3 centuries, was now an expanding cloud of debris. The 200 human prisoners held there had been freed, but not before they'd sabotaged the station's fusion reactors with devastating efficiency. "The humans show tactical knowledge far beyond what our initial assessments indicated," continued Vexnall. "They target critical infrastructure, disrupt supply lines, and consistently demonstrate superior battlefield improvisation. They're fighting an asymmetric campaign that our traditional military doctrine can't counter effectively." Admiral Korath felt a chill of recognition. His own species, the Zephyri, had once fought a similar campaign against an occupying force. It had taken them 40 years to drive out their oppressors, but they'd eventually succeeded through exactly these tactics: patience, coordination, and an absolute refusal to surrender. What about their leader, this Mitchell? "Ghost," Vexnall admitted. He appears at attacks across the galaxy, sometimes simultaneously according to reports. Our best intelligence suggests he's training other humans to operate independently while maintaining overall strategic coordination. He's created a decentralized resistance network that can function even if key leaders are captured or killed. The tactical display zoomed in on the most recent incident. 3 days ago, human insurgents had infiltrated the maximum security prison on Vega 7th and freed 800 prisoners of various species. The operation had been flawlessly executed, with no Imperial survivors to provide intelligence on rebel capabilities or plans. "Sir," a communications officer interrupted nervously, "we're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies. It's addressing you personally." Admiral Korath's mandibles clicked with irritation. "Put it through!" The hologram shifted to show a human male in improvised military gear. His face was scarred, his hair graying, but his eyes burned with the same intensity that had marked him as dangerous 6 months ago. Behind him, dozens of other humans worked at captured Imperial equipment with obvious familiarity. "Admiral Korath," Mitchell's voice carried clearly through the communications array. "I thought it was time we talked." The command center fell silent. For a resistance leader to broadcast directly to Imperial High Command was unprecedented. It suggested a level of confidence and technological capability that sent chills through every officer present. "You have my attention, terrorist," Korath replied. Mitchell smiled without humor. "Terrorist. That's what you called us when we defended our homes, too. I prefer liberator, but we can agree to disagree." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm calling to offer you terms for surrender." The audacity was breathtaking. Korath felt his temper flare. "You're in no position to offer anything, human. We can glass every world in Imperial space if necessary." "You could," Mitchell agreed, "but you won't, because we're not concentrated on worlds anymore. We're scattered through your empire like antibodies in a bloodstream. Every ship, every station, every facility where you've placed human prisoners is now a potential weapons platform under our control." As if to emphasize his point, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A junior officer called out urgently, "Sir, the munitions depot at Altair 4 just exploded. Our entire 4th Fleet ammunition reserve is gone." Mitchell's expression didn't change. "That was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, former U.S. Navy. She's been working in your weapons facilities for 4 months, mapping vulnerabilities and placing charges. Right about now, similar explosions should be occurring at 17 other strategic locations." More alarms sounded. Reports flooded in from across Imperial space. Fuel depots destroyed, communication arrays sabotaged, entire fleets cut off from supply lines. The coordination was perfect, the timing devastating. "You see," Mitchell continued conversationally, "you made a fundamental error when you enslaved us. You assumed that because you'd conquered our military, you'd broken our will to fight. But humans don't work that way. We don't have a command structure you can decapitate. Every one of us is trained to think independently, to improvise, to never give up even when the situation seems hopeless." Admiral Korath watched his empire burning in real time. On the tactical displays, red indicators were spreading like infection through carefully maintained supply lines and defensive positions. "What do you want?" "Complete withdrawal from all former human colonies. Release of all prisoners taken during the conquest of Earth and subsequent operations. Reparations for the civilian populations you murdered." Mitchell's voice hardened. "And the public execution of every Imperial officer who participated in war crimes against human civilians." "Impossible. The Empire doesn't negotiate with rebels." "Then the Empire dies," Mitchell said simply. "You've seen what a few thousand humans can accomplish in 6 months. We've identified the locations of 47,000 more in your slave camps, gladiator pits, and labor facilities. Every day we free more. Every day our network grows stronger." He gestured to someone off-screen, and the display split to show feeds from dozens of locations across the galaxy. Human insurgents attacked Imperial installations with captured weapons, freed prisoners from detention centers, coordinated with alien rebel groups who had been inspired by human success. The truth is, Admiral, you're not fighting a rebellion anymore. You're fighting a revolution, and revolutions don't stop until the oppressive system is completely destroyed. We have the firepower to sterilize every world where humans have been seen, Korath threatened. Do you? Mitchell's smile was predatory. Check your fleet status. With growing dread, Korath accessed the real-time fleet reports. Ship after ship showed critical system failures. Engine cores offline, weapons arrays non-functional, life support compromised. The reports painted a picture of systematic sabotage carried out by trusted personnel over months of careful preparation. Human technical specialists, Mitchell explained helpfully. You've been using them to maintain your ships and stations because they're so good with complex systems. Turns out, understanding how something works also means understanding how to break it in ways that won't be detected until it's too late. The magnitude of the defeat was becoming clear. The Empire had distributed its greatest enemies throughout its most critical infrastructure and given them intimate access to its weaknesses. It was like injecting poison directly into the bloodstream. You have 24 hours to begin withdrawing your forces, Mitchell continued. After that, we start targeting civilian populations the same way you did to us. And I promise you, Admiral, humans are very creative when it comes to warfare. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Admiral Korath stared at the tactical displays showing the systematic dismantling of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for over a millennium. Sir, his aide whispered, what are your orders? Korath looked at the spreading chaos. The reports of rebellion igniting on dozens of worlds as oppressed species took inspiration from human success. The Empire had made the classic mistake of underestimating their enemies and overextending their reach. But more than that, they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Humanity wasn't just another conquered species. They were apex predators from a death world, shaped by millions of years of evolution that rewarded violence, cunning, and an absolute refusal to submit to superior force. The Empire had poked a sleeping bear and discovered that bears don't forgive. Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel from human-occupied sectors, he said finally. And send a message to the Imperial Senate. Tell them the Galactic Empire is officially negotiating terms of surrender with the Human Liberation Front. It was the first time in galactic history that a single species had brought down an interstellar empire. But then again, it was the first time the galaxy had encountered humans. The age of imperial dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun. And throughout the galaxy, in slave camps and detention centers, mining operations and gladiator pits, humans looked up at the stars with hope for the first time since their world had burned. The war was not over, but they were no longer alone, no longer helpless. They were free, and they were coming home.